Just as I was finishing the editing on these montages, our Nazis staged a coup in the Capitol on January 6th. That's the day our Congress certified our presidential election. The coup failed, but that doesn't make it any less a coup. If you attack someone and you fail to kill them, you don't get to redefine the assault as a protest against the victim's face. Speaking of news, you remember how I said Nazis' best defense is I'm rubber and you're glue?
Propaganda media will falsely blame violence on real Donald Trump supporters and freedom-loving patriots. Do not be fooled. The violence will be the actions of Antifa, BLM, and similar communist groups.
Some of the people who breached the Capitol today were not Trump supporters. They were masquerading as Trump supporters, and in fact, were members of the violent terrorist group Antifa.
There are some reports that Antifa sympathizers may have been sprinkled throughout the crowd.
The rumor is that even possibly Antifa insurrectionists possibly could have infiltrated some of these movements.
These horrible things that happened today, I think a lot of it is the Antifa folks.
Antifa.
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 No, just no. I have scoured all this footage from the Capitol siege and I have yet to see a single can of soup.
Soup. And they throw the cans of soup. That's better than a brick because you can't throw a brick, it's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right? Yes, sir. And then when they get caught, they say, no, this is soup for my family. They're so innocent. This is soup for my family. It's incredible. And you have people coming over with bags of soup, big bags of soup, and they lay it on the ground and the anarchists take it and they start throwing it at our cops, at our police. And if it hits you, that's worse because it's
Nothing for you.
Even if it weren't for the obvious coordination from people close to Trump hamstringing the FBI and National Guard, the people on camera doing all this shit are well-known Nazis. Here's a couple of other people who did the work of debunking that bullshit.
Mob violence goes against everything I believe in and everything our movement stands for. No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special.
I don't know if I'll do the fighting myself or if other people will.
We love you. You're very special.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you?
We love you. You're very special.
I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Even as lawmakers and people inside the building were pleading with Trump to send help, he refused. In fact, his aides couldn't even tear him away from the TV.
The Post spoke to 15 people with knowledge of Trump's actions during those 6 hours of mob rule and found Trump to be a man who didn't care, even as Republican lawmakers begged him to speak out.
In the good old days, this doesn't happen because they used to treat them very, very rough. And when they protested once, you know, they would not do it again so easily. We've become weak. We become weak.
It was apparently even worse than that. According to the Washington Post, Trump had not wanted to include the final instruction to stay peaceful in his tweet during the riot. He wanted his supporters to disrupt the counting of the electoral votes through violence. And even when his aides managed to get through to him, Trump refused to help because he was enjoying it so much.
He was engaging with aides as this was all going on. They were interrupting, telling him that he had to do something. They were interrupting, telling him that the Capitol was being overrun by his supporters. He was well aware of it. He was watching it. He was pleased because it was people fighting on his behalf. He was pleased because he liked the scene.
And you know what? The audience swung back. And I thought it was very, very appropriate. The audience hit back. And that's what we need, a little bit more of.
3 weeks inside a pro-Trump QAnon chat room. New York Times opinion reporter Stuart Thompson explains what he heard as he listened in to these conspiracy theorists talk to each other.
We have to trust that there's going to be military tribunals and we get to watch all kinds of executions.
Part of the problem and part of the reason it takes so long is nobody wants to hurt each other anymore.
The people on this chat room that you listened to, they were quite clear about who they believe sent them to the Capitol for a violent siege. So let's listen to that.
Does he not realize President Trump called us to siege the place?
In the lead up to the protest and then the eventual insurrection attempt, there was chatter about sieging the Capitol, storming the Capitol, hoping that that would happen. And then, watching it unfold, they were pretty pleased with everything that was going on. Only afterwards did they then, turn to groups like Antifa, which is a common scapegoat, to explain that they were the ones advocating for violence and pushing into the building first.
The officer there in Houston,
that we found out after the fact was part of the riot, at the riot in Washington. And are there any other investigations into whether more officers were potentially involved?
But there are now multiple officers in the Capitol Police Department, the Capitol Police Force, who are under investigation for their roles in the insurrection that took place.
President Trump had spent months calling his supporters to a march on a specific day, at a specific time, in specific places to stop the certification. And leading up to the event, there were hundreds of posts online showing that his supporters took this as a call to arms to attack the Capitol. There were detailed posts of plans to attack online. Law enforcement warned that these posts were real threats and even made arrests days leading up to the attack.
Gates floated this story from the Washington Times that a facial recognition company had seen that some of the mob was really Antifa, and that's kind of interesting. What's more interesting is that the facial recognition company said, no, we didn't.
It turns out the story Gates based his line of bullshit on was, of course, also bullshit and has since been retracted. It turns out the facial recognition software the rumor was based on actually identified 2 members of neo-Nazi organizations and a QAnon supporter among the pro-Trump mob, not Antifa members. Oh, well, that's a little bit of an oops, isn't it?
Members of several well-known hate groups identified at Capitol riot. Cool. You should give this article a read.
But if you're going to sell ass-covering fantasies that rioters weren't really the president's supporters, you know what might help? If the president's supporters would stop bragging that they're the ones who rioted.
We stormed the fucking Capitol, and for all you bitches on Facebook going crazy right now talking about it was Antifa fucking being infiltrating and that it wasn't us, it was us. We proudly took back our Capitol. We had the fucking cops running. They ran from us, and not because they're bitches, but because they're smart.
Hello, U.S. Senate. Yes, we have a fraudulent election. I would like to report. Yeah, we need to get our boy Donald J. Trump into office.
Floyd Griffin, a Republican county commissioner from New Mexico who was also part of the mob.
It's going to be a sad day because there's going to be blood running out of that building, but at the end of the day, you mark my word, we will plant our flag on the desk of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And Donald J. Trump, if it boils down to it.
Wow. Also, how does that guy have a job that's not selling used cars? And how is that job funded by taxpayers?
Broke into the Speaker of the House's office. His name is Richard Big O Barnett. He identified himself as the intruder to a New York Times reporter. Has he ever seen the Times motto? All the news that's admissible in court.
Today is the day the Democrats realize they lost. We, the people, will not accept a Joe Biden presidency. You have no power over us.
Tomorrow? I don't even like to say it because I'll be arrested.
Well, let's not say it.
We need to go, I'll say it. All right. We need to go in to the Capitol.
So on the 6th, we saw all of these different wings of the right. QAnon adherents, Christian dominionists, MAGA people, like normal, like just hardcore supporters of the president. And we saw out and out neo-Nazis getting closer and closer wound together over their mutual desire to overthrow the elected government, which they all see as illegitimate. They all want to do violence to their political enemies. You can see shades of it within Rush Limbaugh.
There cannot be a peaceful coexistence of 2 completely different theories of life, theories of government, theories of how we manage our affairs.
So I've been covering the far right and white supremacist movements for a few years now.
There's this interlocking network of right-wing thought leaders who have been, for years, increasingly pushing for violence on behalf of this insurgent conservative movement.
But now it's time to act on the enemy. People need to have their battle rifles and everything ready at their bedsides. This is it.
I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the 2 corners of the White House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. That's how you won the revolution.
What can you and I do to a state legislator besides kill them? Although we should not do that. I'm not advising that, but I mean, what else can you do, right?
No one has any excuse to be surprised by what happened on the 6th. It was signposted in places like Salem. You're asking about like what were the signs, how did this develop? It developed exactly the way that anti-fascist activists have been warning it has been for years. These people are drawing a movement to them and inciting violence around the country, and eventually it will burst in some way that's too big to ignore it. And it finally did.
The 3%ers. 3%ers are a militia group who I discussed in the second part of my Punisher police problem videos, and explained that they are one of the many white nationalist militia groups who had co-opted the Punisher symbol for their fascist purposes. The 3%ers derive their name from a disputed historical claim that only 3% of Americans fought the British in the Revolutionary War. The extremist group exists within the U.S.'s so-called militia movement and is traditionally viewed as an anti-government group. Members are strong supporters of President Trump. QAnon is a far-right conspiracy theory group, and it baselessly alleges that Trump is fighting a deep state cabal of pedophiles and human traffickers. The group played a huge role in organizing nationwide Stop the Steal protests in the months since President-elect Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
He claims the shirtless, face-painted horns guy was Antifa. It would be interesting if I could find a photo of this that isn't so cropped. Q sent me. Oh, it's a QAnon guy who has attended Trump rallies and spoken in favor of the president. In fact, didn't Vadim post a video of this shirtless guy on Twitter?
And if we look into the fact that George Floyd was actually in the pornography industry, was into pornography, and George Floyd's best friend, who just so happens to look exactly like George Floyd, is also a Freemason. And here's George Floyd with
thinks that all black people look the same.
In November and December, loosely organized Stop the Steal groups hosted rallies in Washington, D.C., Michigan, Las Vegas, Atlanta, Ohio. And there were absolutely neo-Nazis in the Capitol yesterday. Baked Alaska and Nick Fuentes, both very, very Nazi. You may have seen the images going around of the guy I've called Gandalf the White Nationalist. He's wearing a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt. Yeah.
The fact checkers will also let you know that this Trump supporter is definitely not Antifa. That's why he has the communist hammer and sickle tattooed on his hand, like most Trump supporters do.
Yeah, I guess the outsider's mark from the Dishonored game does kind of look like a hammer and sickle.
Then we got the Proud Boys, of course.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Ran around D.C. for a weekend, stabbing random people. The Proud Boys chairman, Enrique Tarrio, announced on Parler earlier this week that the group would be attending Wednesday's rally incognito, dressed in all black instead of their usual black and yellow uniform with MAGA hats.
A large percentage of the crowd was not working class at all, but rather wealthy conservatives who just wanted to be part of the excitement. Take these guys, for example, yelling at a handful of DC police.
We're fucking back, but we ain't got your back. We're the business owners. We're the veterans. We're the veterans. We're the business owners. We got your back, but we ain't got your back no more.
Business owners. Among the attendees were the CEO of a tech company, lawyers, high-profile attorneys, Republican elected officials, both current and retired, the son of a Brooklyn Supreme Court judge, and this woman, a real estate broker from Frisco, Texas, who flew on her private jet with her wealthy friends to have some fun breaking windows. As is typical in America, the wealthy can brazenly commit crimes, brag about it, and face no consequences. This woman described the riot as one of the best days of my life. She went on to say, "This is a prelude to war. We also saw literal Nazis. This is where a lot of conservatives shake their heads and say, you can't call everyone you disagree with a Nazi. I'm not. I'm calling Nazis Nazis." This guy is wearing a Camp Auschwitz shirt, bearing the words, "Work brings freedom." This one is wearing a shirt that means 6 million wasn't enough, referring to the number of Jews murdered during the Holocaust. Neo-Nazi social media personality Baked Alaska live-streamed from inside the Capitol. That Viking guy from all the pictures? That's Jake Angeli, known by many as the QAnon Shaman. That symbol he's got tattooed on his chest is widely used in Nazi and white supremacist groups under the guise of appreciating European heritage. So, we've seen business owners, millionaires, QAnon cultists, white supremacists, and literal Nazis in the crowd at the Capitol. Who else would you expect to see there? If you said Republican elected officials, congratulations, you're right. to anyone paying attention, it shouldn't come as a surprise that some of our fearless leaders took part in the insurrection. Many Republicans have been helping to spread the lie that Trump actually won the election. West Virginia state lawmaker Derek Evans was there, as were former Pennsylvania State Representative Rick Saccone, Virginia State Senator Amanda Chase, incoming co-chair of the Michigan Republican Party Michonne Maddock, Missouri State Rep Justin Hill, Tennessee State Rep Terry Lynn Weaver, Nevada State Assembly Member Annie Black, and likely others who were smart enough not to show their faces on camera. Other Republicans chose not to attend and instead tweet their support or pull the strings behind the scenes. Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert tweeted out, "Today is 1776," and "America is depending on all of us today. This is something I don't take lightly. I will fight with everything I have to ensure the fairness of the election." You know, like overthrowing the government and tossing out the legitimate results to reinstate the loser.
He specifically told the crowd to protest peacefully and patriotically, and the vast majority of them did. But every movement has a lunatic fringe.
The day after the riot, a poll found that 45% of Republican voters backed the attack on the Capitol building. That's not a fringe. That's almost half the outfit. If you wore a suit that was 45% fringe, you'd be arrested for public indecency, but at least we'd be able to see through your pants to know you don't have any balls.